Kwaba, welcome to this week's edition of Ghana in Focus with myself, Kwame, Ghanaian writer, broadcaster, journalist, writer, and podcast entrepreneur. And this week's edition of Ghana in Focus is a special, the city, the currency of the Ghanaian city, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that's what we'll be talking about, the Ghanaian city, the good, the bad, and the ugly. All right, so before we get into the podcast, just to make you aware that you can subscribe to Ghana Africa in Focus on YouTube, and also you can subscribe to Ghana Africa in Focus on Spotify. Just click or just look for Ghana Africa in Focus on Spotify. Click the follow button, and that will mean that every time we upload a new podcast, Spotify will notify you. Likewise, if you click the notification button on YouTube, look out for Ghana Africa in Focus, click the notification bell, and YouTube will inform you every time we upload a new podcast. And if you'd like to give us a donation to help the show, help you bring some great content from Ghana and from the African continent or from the African world, you can donate as little as $3 a month, and I'll leave you the link to donate on the Funnest TV show. All right, and if you want to come to Ghana, do business, know about how to set up a business, know about the Ghana card, know about immigration, etc., then we do a consulting session whereby we can give you a lot of valuable information and also signpost you to third parties who will be able to also give you some good information as well. So if you like a 1 hour consulting session, we charge $30 for that, US for that. But if you also want a half an hour briefing, to give you an idea of what we can help you with, then that's $20 for half an hour briefing. All right, so let's get into this week's edition of Ghana in Focus, looking at the Ghana city, the good, the bad, and the ugly. All right, so the good is that the city is the world's best performing currency so far in 2025. Bearing in mind that just 2.5 years ago, 2022, Ghana cedi was the world's worst performing currency of that year. And so it's a fantastic turnaround that within 2.5 years, the Ghana cedi is now the world's best performing currency. And so what are the factors behind this? Is it sustainable? And what could be some of the consequences of Ghana having a low cedi, a cedi where it is now, or as well as what happens if the cedi was to depreciate, which it will do, and I'll come on to that as the podcast evolves. So some of the key factors that has allowed the cedi to appreciate against all major currencies so far this year. So it's appreciated against the US dollar, the British pound sterling, and also the euro. We trade that as follows. So far, the Ghanaian cedi has appreciated nearly a whopping 50% against the US dollar since the beginning of the year. That is a phenomenal achievement by the current NDC Mahama government. Yeah. Now, the cedi started the year at 15 Ghana cedis to a US dollar, and is strengthened to just above 10.2 cedis per US dollar. So that shows you a great appreciation, as I just said, since the beginning of the year. Now, what are some of the driving factors behind this? Now, obviously, there was an election in December last year that people voted decisively. In fact, the margin of victory for John Mahama and the NDC was the biggest margin in Ghana's recent history since the 2000s. Massive victory for John Mahama and the NDC. And if you look at the Ghanaian House of Parliament, the number of seats prove that. In the 275 House, the NDC has a whopping 188 87 seats compared to the NDC's, so MPP, the outgoing administration's 88. So there was a massive defeat of the MPP, which was predicated on a poor performing economy, of which a poor performing city was the foundation of that economic decline that Ghana witnessed, particularly between 2021 and 2022. And so, you know, a new government has come in, and that has signaled improved investor confidence within the new government. Some of the measures that they've taken, which include some economic reforms, and some of these economic reforms include, cutting government expenditure, which the last government refused to do, also cutting government waste, that the last government refused to do, and also making streamlined, the budget. So as I mentioned to you earlier on the year, I think around about March, April, there was a budget that was had in Ghana. And like I said in one of my podcasts, that budget could either be make or break for this government, because it would tell us the trajectory economically of where they're heading Ghana. And so, within that budget, there are many, many economic reforms, including streamlining taxation, and also cutting out, a lot of unnecessary taxes, like the COVID levy, like the emissions levy, and also like the e-levy, which was very, very popular, particularly with Ghanaian voters, and also some businesses, the business community as well. Also, there's been stabilization of inflation. So if you recall, at the end of 2022, inflation in Ghana stood at a whopping 54.8%. Yeah, by the time of the last election, that's whittled down to around about 28%. Today, as we speak in Ghana, inflation is just above 10%. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Inflation is about 18%. Yeah, down from 23% in May. So it tells you of the effects of the current government's economic reforms that has enabled inflation to go down significantly since January. Having said that, though, food inflation is still a problem in Ghana, where food is still expensive, and I'll come on to that also within the podcast, where food is still expensive, which is having an effect on certain aspects of growth. But this stabilization of inflation is also a big part as to why the cedi has improved or appreciated against the global currencies like the pound, the US dollar, and the euro. Also, as I sort of hinted, there's been a lot of fiscal discipline within this government in terms of not exceeding expenditure, and also working within tight budgets in order to, reduce the debt GDP ratio, because there is an ambitious target that this current government has set itself, that they want to get at least, the debt GDP ratio to manageable levels. And we're talking about in the realms of the high 50s, early 60s percentage points. So what that means, in real terms, is that the government wants to get the debt GDP ratio down to around about the high 50s and the low 60s percentage. Now, if it is able to do that, and it is on track to do that via the discipline, via this having a very, very tight budget and not spending outside of that budget capacity, then the government will be able to reach that target of 50-something or early 60-something percent of debt to GDP ratio, which also help stimulate growth in the economy. Now, all these factors have compelled or enabled an environment whereby the local currency has appreciated against all major global currencies. Now, if you look at also some of the drivers, yeah, that are spearheaded this economic comeback, particularly the stabilization of the city, is one of these is the debt restriction, as I just hinted earlier on, debt restriction and fiscal discipline. So essentially, what has happened within the last few months is that Ghana has successfully restructured 13 billion US dollars in Eurobond debt, therefore easing its external debt burden. So, because the cedi has appreciated, particularly against the US dollar, yeah, by a whopping 50%, already half of that debt restructuring has already been paid to those external creditors, yeah? Meaning that Ghana, there's a bit more money for the government of Ghana to play around with, as opposed to had the currency not appreciated against the dollar. Again, as I've mentioned, the fiscal deficit, yeah, which is basically the debt to GDP ratio. Now, apparently, according to the government of Ghana itself, and also by international bodies like Bloomberg, the debt GDP ratio is expected to fall from a whopping 93% in 2022 to run about 60% by the end of this year. And that's like it's largely due to the fact that Ghana has been able to actually pay back, because of the appreciation of the cedi, half of its Eurobond debt to the external creditors. Yeah. And again, as part of this fiscal discipline that we're talking about, one thing that the government is aiming for is that it is aiming for a budget surplus by the year end. And so if the cedi continues to appreciate against global currencies like the US dollar, then it is very possible that there will be a budget surplus by the end of the year. And that will be a phenomenal achievement by this government, considering where Ghana was, just 2.5 years ago at the back end of 2022, with record inflation and also record interest rates and also a currency that was going through the roof. So, if the government can get budget surplus by the end of the year, that would be a massive achievement. Now, another thing in terms of the cedi stabilization, as I mentioned, it's appreciated by a whopping 50% already, yeah? And that's helped, okay, reduce the cost of imports, because Ghana imports a lot of food and also services as well. And because of the appreciation of the cedi, it has helped reduce import costs, which are killing businesses, which a lot of businesses left Ghana last couple of years ago, and also stabilized fuel and food prices to a certain degree. Now, fuel, at the beginning of the year, Ghanaians were buying petrol at the pump for around about 17 Ghana cedis. That now has reduced to around about 10, 11 Ghana cedis amongst the various oil marketing companies that operate within Ghana. So again, that's put money in people's pockets because of the cedi's appreciation against the dollar, because people now are not spending so much on transport, because transportation, whether you were a private driver or used public transport, transportation was a big kind of expenditure of older Ghanaians, yeah? And so because of the fact that the cedi has appreciated, thus making fuel cheaper, thus reducing petrol prices, and thus making it cheaper to run a car in Ghana and also to do car business in Ghana, that has allowed people to get some money in their pockets, okay, because of the stabilization of the fuel prices, because of the cedi's appreciation. Yeah, and also, like I said at the beginning also, food is still an issue. Food inflation is still an issue in Ghana, but nowhere near as it was just over 2 years ago. But food prices, particularly in a country that has a lot of arable land, for me, food prices are still high in Ghana. But nonetheless, the prices that they're increasing is beginning to come down a peg or two. Now, I mentioned inflation, and the reason why, that's now dipped to 18.4% as of last month, May, and apparently the government's projections to take it down to even further to 10% by 2026 is attributed primarily to the tight monetary policy and also improved exchange rate stability. So, like I said, since April, the Ghanaian cedi has stabilized against global currencies like the US dollar, the pound sterling, and the euro. And because of this, government is now able to, have a bit of money to play with, yeah? And also because of the tight monetary policy that this government has enacted upon, i.e., to cut waste within public sector, i.e., to tighten the unnecessary spending. So, for example, the government has cancelled all, trips on first class, yeah? So people are taking, under the last government, people are going, left, right, and center on first class, which was costing the government a lot of money. This government has now nipped that in the bud and is following a tight monetary regime, which means that a lot of first class travel has been cancelled by the current government, and ministers are encouraged to, go travel on, economy as opposed to business class or first class. Again, in terms of government expenditure, the government has now put a policy in place where every government minister and even the district assembly members will now operate in electronic cars, yeah, as opposed to gas guzzling 4x4s like the V8 that were taking a lot of revenue in terms of petrol revenue, yeah. And so the government has now got a policy whereby every minister and also the president himself and also the regional ministers as well as the district assembly members are going to be using electric vehicles, which will mean two things: that A, government is not spending massive amounts of money buying fuel, buying petrol for these cars, and secondly, it's going to help with the Ghana's green policy, green agenda policy, as well as safeguard the environment as well. So all this is encompassed within the tight fiscal monetary space which the government has put in place, which is obviously why you have now inflation being under control within Ghana, which is also helping the performance of the local currency. Again, another reason why the cedi is performing is because there's sectoral growth within key sectors of the Ghanaian economy. So, for example, agriculture. And agriculture is the bedrock, not just of Ghana, but of every single African country, yeah? Because basically we live in an agrarian society, yeah? And so agriculture in Ghana is very, very key and very important. As I mentioned before in another podcast, referring to Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, he is aware of the fact that agriculture plays a very key and pivotal role in nation development, which is why he's invested a lot of money to improve Burkina Faso's agriculture. Again, like with Ghana as well, this government, under this government, within the 6 months of this government here, we've seen strong growth in crops like cocoa, like cashew nuts, which has been supported by a strong irrigation and mechanization programs, which have helped farmers improve their yield. Yeah, and also with the seedlings as well, Ghana is beginning to produce its own organic seedlings as opposed to GM seedlings and hybrid seedlings. And because of that, that's now increasing agriculture, which is again helping to bolster crops like cocoa, like cashew nuts, etc., which are big earners for Ghana. Again, which is also helping the foreign revenue, which again helps stabilize the currency. Now, again, the industrial sector is also has experienced growth in the last 6 months. So, you know, when we look at mining, especially lithium, so we're not talking about gold mining or diamond mining, but lithium. Ghana discovered lithium in huge quantities about a couple of years ago. And lithium is a very, very important mineral because it's basically used within AI and also the electric cars revolution that we see taking place in Europe and also North America and Asia and also parts of the continent as well. And so lithium mining is beginning to expand rapidly in Ghana, as well as manufacturing and construction. So these key industries are also playing a part in the economic revival of Ghana. Also, services such as fintech, ICT, you know, digital payment sectors as well is also helping within to foster economic, well, not economic recovery, but more like investor confidence within the economy because of these sectors such as fintech, ICT, which are becoming very, very credible and operational functional and more in terms of more investor friendly in Ghana. So these, you know, these services, yeah, are seeing sectorial growth, which is also helping to fuel the appreciation of the Ghana cedi. Now also, you know, because of the fiscal prudency of this current government, yeah, which has led to the appreciation of the Ghana cedi, yeah, it has increased investor confidence and credit rating upgrade within Ghana. So just recently, Fitch, which is one of the world's foremost credit reference agencies in terms of like global credit, you know, worthy, has upgraded Ghana's rating from a default, yeah, to -B with a stable outlook. So what that means is that because of the fiscal management of this current government, as opposed to the last government, yeah, foreign investors are more confident now in the Ghanaian economy than they were a year ago. And because of this investor confidence, yeah, we have seen Ghana's credit rating move up, yeah, from D where it was to default to B minus, which basically means, you know, which basically means the economy has stabilized and that there is confidence within the economy that Ghana's economy has a good outlook. And so this is also, this investor confidence has also signaled investing within the Ghana economy and the various sectors within the economy, like mining, like agriculture, and all this has contributed to the appreciation of the Ghana cedi. Okay. So before we get on to the bad and the ugly, so I've told you about the good. So these are all the good points, yeah, of the appreciation of the cedi, yeah. Now, the bad aspect of it is that can it be sustained? Yeah, because I mentioned all these things about how and why the Ghana cedi has seen good appreciation over the last 6 months in particular. Yeah, but can that be sustained? And I don't think so, for 3 key reasons. Let me give you 3 reasons why I don't think it can be sustained. Yeah. Now, 1, next year, 2026, Ghana will need to pay now some of its creditors, yeah? This is not the Eurobond, this is like the external debt, like China, the EU, they owes, yeah? So that will have to come in, now start coming in next year. And a lot of the gains that's been made by the currency this year will be severely tested because Ghana now, we need to buy more dollars in order to pay those external creditors like China, like the European Union, etc. Yeah. 2, there's been also a lot of buying of dollars, yeah, because of the gold for the gold. Well, they started with the gold for oil, yeah, but that really didn't see great impact. But now, and this is something I said all along, the Ghana needs gold reserves, yeah. So now you got the gold board, which is like the gold board company of Ghana. And what that initiative is, it seeks to buy gold from Ghanaian small-scale miners and miners of repute, and that gold is now stored within Ghana, and that is used as gold reserves to pump up the currency. Now, why I say it can't be sustained is that there's two things. So one, like I said, the government has been buying dollars in order to prop up the cedi, as well as some of the other initiatives that I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Now, when the government starts paying its debt, yeah, to China and the EU and others, yeah, some of that gold reserves is going to dwindle down, yeah, because that'll have a knockdown effect on those gold reserves that they've got already, yeah, and that will obviously have a knockdown effect onto the currency, yeah. And then the third reason is that, you know, even though they are, inflation is that there's a target for 10%, you know, by the end of this year or early next year. You know, if government wants to, you know, do some spending in terms of more infrastructure development, yeah, which is one of its key objectives, more infrastructure development, right? They want to finish some of the schools that were built. They want to build some more roads, etc., right? That's going to put pressure on inflation, yeah, and that could mean inflation will go up, meaning that that will have an effect on the currency. So that's the bad aspect for me of this cedi depreciation, that it can't be sustained because of the factors that I've just mentioned already. Now, the ugly side of it, so before I come into the outlook and predicted growth and what we feel may happen, the ugly side of it is that prices of general goods and services generally have not come down in Ghana. So outside of transportation, yeah, where the fuel cost of petrol has gone down quite a lot, where even transport hasn't come down as rapidly as it should have done, because there was even, you know, murmurings in some quarter that the Ghana Road Transportation Union was not really prepared to put down the prices of transportation costs, because, as they say, the spare parts and other anomalies used to run the vehicles has not gone down. They were not willing to pass on, you know, the fuel changes in terms of to the customer, and so, you know, but they were pressured by the government into doing so, you know, late last month. But aside from transportation, right, a lot of goods and services are not really going down in Ghana too much. So food, like I said, food is a big one. That has not really come down as much as you would have expected, given the appreciation of the Ghana cedi in the last 6 months. So food in certain places is still high. Again, you know, other goods and services, you know, like construction services, like financial services, these other services, right? The prices have not gone down as one would have imagined, yeah. And this is the ugly side of this depreciation. And even some building materials have stayed the same, apart from cement. Cement has gone down from about 120 Ghana cedis a bag to around about mid-80s for a bag. Don't forget, you know, a couple of years ago, it was under 40, so it was under 50. So, you know, some aspects of goods and services in Ghana have not really changed, despite the depreciation of the Ghana cedi. And really and truly, some of that can be attributed to greed, because a lot of these people who import goods and services into Ghana, they're looking at their profit margins, they're looking at what they bought their goods for initially when the cedi was 15. Now it's down to 10. They're thinking to themselves, if I cut my prices, I'm going to be at a loss. So there's a bit of kind of some greed at hand, which is not allowing prices to fall further than they should do, given the cedi's appreciation over the last 6 months or so. So that's the ugly side of this cedi appreciation, is that the price of goods and services are not coming down as fast as one would like. Yeah, and that's a problem, you know, particularly for the ordinary Ghanaian who are still struggling with the cost of living crisis in Ghana. And so let's look at the outlook for this year and beyond. So according to the government of Ghana and according to Bloomberg, yeah, the GDP growth, yeah, is projected for this year in regions of 4 to about 5.5%. Yeah, which is not bad, considering that last year, I think that Ghana had about 3% or 4%. So if this projected to finish the year about 5.5%, yeah, then that's a pretty good return considering where Ghana was. Now, again, in terms of foreign reserves, it is stating that by the end of the year, that will increase to 6.8 billion, as compared to where it is now, around about 4 billion. That will also boost macroeconomic stability and also reinforce investor confidence in Ghana. And again, a key thing for this year is that Ghana intends to exit its IMF program, because over the last 3 years, it's been supported by an IMF program. And so Ghana aims to exit its program by mid-2026. So these factors I just mentioned could help within the further stabilization of the local currency. All right, so this is important to you, particularly if you're coming to Ghana to do business. Yeah, if you're a Ghanaian living in Ghana already, and if you are coming to, even coming to holiday in Ghana, because obviously you want to get accommodation, you will buy food, you use transportation, you may want to do some feasibility studies, etc. So this podcast is giving you an idea of the current economic stability and economic prospects of the country right now, and also what it hopes to attain by the end of the year. So this issue about the city, the picture of the city, the good, the bad, and ugly, is a very, very important feature that we thought was important to bring to you, to give you an idea as to how the appreciation of the Ghana city, how it's come about, why it's come about, some of the factors that have affected the city appreciation, some of the factors that may derail it, and also why some aspects of Ghana in terms of the goods and services have not seen a marked decline, even though the city has appreciated by 50% against the US dollar this year. So I hope you've enjoyed this special edition of Ghana in Focus, looking at the city, the Ghana currency of the city. I hope it's given you some food for thought, particularly if you're coming to Ghana this year, whether to do business, whether to be on holiday, or whether to look at potentially wanting to relocate to Ghana and start a business. All right, so next week, we're going to be doing some tourism, because it is that time of year in Europe and North America where people are looking at the holidays for the summertime. So we're going to bring you some fantastic African destinations, because we are promoting tourism in Africa. So rather than go to Europe and North America or even Asia, I want you to come to Africa, because Africa's got a lot to offer. Despite the propaganda you hear on the Western media, Africa is a beautiful continent with a lot to offer, and we're going to share some of that with you in some of our African tourism series that we've continued throughout the year, or for the last few years, that we're going to continue this year. All right, so look out for that, starting next week. So from myself, Kwame, and from all the crew here on Ghana in Focus, is thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week for some more tourism in Africa, looking at Cape Town. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.